Okay. So there are a lot of different diets out there and a lot of different eating styles. And that is because not one eating style suits everybody. To say that everyone should eat the same way is the same as saying that everyone should train the same way as well. An eating style as well is the same as a training. If I tell you to run 30 minutes a day, every single day, then your body's going to get used to that, right? You're never going to see any progression. And that is also the same with diets. That's why, in the beginning of a diet, usually you'll see results, and then suddenly you hit that famous plateau, and then suddenly it doesn't work for you anymore. So Project U, the nutrition style that I teach, is to constantly be evolving in the way that you eat, because your body was made for efficiency. Everything that you throw at your body will make it more efficient over time. That's how training works, right? So one day you run 30 minutes and you run 5Ks. And the next week you run 30 minutes and you run 5.5Ks. And your body keeps on evolving and keeps on changing in response to a stimulus. And that's the same with your diet as well. So one eating style will not serve you for your whole life. That's not possible. In the same way that one training style will not serve you for the rest of your life either. And, I had a question yesterday about, okay, so we're going to be doing a low calorie diet. Well, I don't want to focus on calories simply because that can be very unhealthy. And also eating a low calorie diet will work for a certain amount of time, but then you train your body to be able to survive only on that amount of calories. And then it will not work anymore, because then your body, starts to save on calories here and there. And at some point you'll plateau. So the eating style that we're going to talk about is about keeping variances happening, keeping your body guessing. And it's the same with training as well, right? So that's the thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of nutrition in Project U. It's about going back to a more ancestral style of eating, the foods that that our bodies evolved on. And obviously, healthy foods, because, we can't kid ourselves that we can keep on eating highly processed foods and still have ultimate health. The body won't function unless it is being provided with the nutrients that it needs. We all know that. And when it comes to calories, yes, of course, weight loss is always going to involve some kind of a calorie deficit. It's energy in and energy out. But the thing that I want to really focus on with Project U is the quality of the calories that you get in, because you can say 100 calories is 100 calories, but 100 calories of broccoli is going to do very different things for your body than 100 calories of chocolate. So, that's what I really want to keep in mind. Now, when we're eating a nutritious diet, our body is not going to be asking for extra food all the time, simply because it feels nourished and it has enough. So it's also about breaking down the relationships that we have with food and putting food back to what it should be, which is nourishment for the body, and also self-care. A lot of the times, if we engage in emotional eating, it's either to mask feelings that we don't feel like dealing with, or it is to distract us from something that, that we find boring or that we don't want to engage in. And, with Project U, I want to focus on caring for your body by providing it with all of the nutrients that it needs to give you the best performance possible. I want you to feel good, feel energized, have really nice, clear thinking, and be ready to tackle the world head on, right? To live your dreams and to be able to feel your utmost. So what are carbs, and why am I so down on carbs by prescribing a low-calorie diet? Well, you know, carbs are one of the 3 macronutrients. You've got carbs, fats, and proteins. And it is the preferred energy source of the central nervous system. In fact, if you don't take in dietary carbs, your body will break down its reserves to create carbohydrates for your central nervous system to run on. So just because you're not taking in carbs doesn't mean that your body's not running on carbs. We have this amazing storage system called our fat storage, and that is what is going to, that's what's going to fuel us and power us. When we take away dietary carbohydrates, our body goes into the storage and breaks it down. And for most people, fat loss is something that they're looking for. So that is, that is one of the major reasons that I'm choosing a low carbohydrate diet here, is so that we can get into our fat stores. And when I talk about our fat stores, I'm talking about being able to generate energy from the food that you eat, but also being able to generate energy from the fat stores that you have, which is central to losing weight, obviously. So there are 3 types of carbohydrates. There are sugars, starches, and fiber. So sugars are very simple carbohydrates. Starches are somewhat more complex, but when you break them down, they go straight into sugars. And then fiber is a type of carbohydrate that is not able to be digested by the human body. It comes from plants. And this is what moves things through our digestive tract. And it's also a really good food source for our gut bacteria, which are essential to keeping us very healthy. So what do carbs do? So they provide fuel for the central nervous system. So they help us have energy. They help our muscles work. And they also provide a protection so that we don't start to break down our body and especially our muscles. Because what the body can do, it's very clever, is if there are no carbohydrates and there is an excess of protein, then the body can actually break down protein to be able to manufacture carbohydrates as well. Now, we want to prevent that from happening because we don't want to run on broken down protein. We want to run on our fat stores. But the lack of carbohydrates can also enable our fat metabolism. Now, we all know that if we eat too much, then the excess calories are stored as body fat in our bodies, right? So body fat is the storage of fuel, and we need to break that down again to be able to get energy. And that is what we're actually looking at with this nutrition plan. So the key to the anti-inflammatory and anti-stress mechanism of the low-carb diet is insulin. So when we consume carbohydrates, it gets digested and then absorbed into our bloodstream, right? And we're very much concerned with blood sugar these days. So insulin is the key to getting sugar or carbohydrates out of our blood and into our cells so that we can utilize them inside our cells for energy. So what happens is insulin is like a little key to the door. It fits in the keyhole, the door opens, and the blood sugar can go out of the blood and into the cell to be used as energy. So when the body has sufficient energy as well, insulin signals to the liver to take up glucose and store it as glycogen. And we can store quite a bit of glycogen in our liver. And then once that store is completely full, then we start to store the rest of the blood sugar as body fat. Okay, so high blood sugar, and this is what a lot of people suffer from these days. So if you've ever been told that you have metabolic syndrome or that you're pre-diabetic, that means that high levels of blood sugar have been detected in your blood, and it's because insulin is not working properly. Now, in the same way that if you are to be addicted to drugs, that every time you have another hit of your drugs, you need more and more, it's the same with insulin being the key in the lock. So every time you trigger a high blood sugar level, then insulin needs to go to the insulin receptors to let the blood sugar in. But you need more and more insulin every time to be able to let blood sugar through. Now, if you're constantly triggering high blood sugar by constantly eating a lot of carbohydrate, then you're going to make the receptors for the insulin somewhat dull to the effect of insulin. And that's what we call insulin resistance. So the way to stop insulin resistance is to go cold turkey. So the same way as if you want to sharpen your tolerance to drugs, then you have to stop taking them for a while. And it's the same with insulin as well. So a low carbohydrate diet is going to give your insulin receptors a bit of a break from having to work so hard all the time. So high blood sugar can really cause havoc in the body. It can damage the vessels that supply blood to vital organs. It can increase the risk of heart disease and stroke, kidney disease, vision problems, nerve problems, and it causes oxidative stress in the body. Oxidative stress in the body is the trigger for a lot of diseases like diabetes, polycystic ovary syndrome, and also things like Alzheimer's disease. So it is definitely something that we want to avoid. And utilizing a low carbohydrate diet is going to be something that is going to stop all of this stress that high blood sugar is causing the body. So what types of low carbohydrate diets do we have? Well, the most famous one was always the Atkins diet. So Atkins is actually a ketogenic diet these days. It started off being a high protein diet, but as we spoke about before, when there is an excess of protein in the diet, it can actually be broken down into glucose as well. Atkins these days, the way that the books are written, the first stage of Atkins is actually what's called a ketogenic diet. Ketogenic diet is a very, very low carbohydrate diet, something around 5% of your total calories per day being from carbohydrate. And a ketogenic diet is something that is beneficial because it actually triggers your body to be able to utilize fat as a fuel source very effectively. What it also does is it offers your body an alternative fuel source, which is called ketones. And this comes from our evolution. In Paleolithic times, or in times that perhaps food supply was not always constant, we developed a way of still being able to have energy even though there was no food around. And the state that we go into when we fast long term is called ketosis, because when we break down fat, we start to release an alternative fuel source for the body called ketones. And ketones mean that your body can utilize these energy molecules in your muscles instead of utilizing glucose. So for people that have issues with insulin resistance, even for people that feel hungry all the time or feel like they have body inflammation, a ketogenic diet can be very, very helpful to reverse all of those symptoms. In fact, I have a friend who works in Holland, in the Netherlands. They exclusively treat people with diabetes and metabolic syndrome with a ketogenic diet. It's a whole facility that does that. And I'm hoping to actually get him to speak to us at some point, because that's some very, very interesting research and amazing results that they get there. So the last low carb diet that I'm going to touch on is the paleo diet. Now, for people that are doing Project U, you've been given a copy of the keto meal plan. Now, of course, it's always a discussion that you can have with me. If you do not feel comfortable with that meal plan, then we can always do a hybrid meal plan with a paleo meal plan as well. It's slightly higher in carbohydrates, but you'll still get the added benefit of not triggering insulin release all the time. So there's a lot of ways that we can do this. Okay, so some of the benefits of low carb diets that I want to quickly run through here is that low carb diets are really great with your hunger hormones. They make sure that you feel fuller for longer because they are really high in satiating macronutrients and also really high in micronutrients as well. And when your body's being nourished, it's not going to be constantly asking for extra food all the time. And it's going to offer you blood sugar stability, which means that it's going to offer you energy balance. It means that you're not going to be riding this blood sugar wave of feeling really energized and then feeling really sleepy and then feeling really energized. It's going to give you a nice even level of energy throughout the day. Now, studies do show that low carb diets lead to more weight loss at first, and that is through a couple of different methods. Studies show that people are more successful, especially in the beginning of the diet, than people on low-fat diets. Low carb diets do let go of excess water in the body because it's actually carbohydrate that holds onto water. The thing is, yes, it's just water weight that you lose, but it is a very motivating factor, of course, as well. But one thing to remember with low carb diets is that you do need to support your body with hydrating it a lot. And hydrating means that you also have to be good with your micro minerals, things like sodium, potassium, and magnesium, because when your body dumps water, it tends to dump those micro minerals as well. But I've got some very easy ways that you can stay hydrated and keep your mineral levels up. Okay, you get a reduction in triglycerides. Now you'll probably recognize triglycerides from blood tests that you may have had. Triglycerides are actually free-floating fatty acids in your system, and they are actually an energy molecule. Your body can consume them if there is a lack of carbohydrate in the system. So this is actually a beautiful way that you can get rid of excessive triglycerides in the system, because you will be using them as an energy molecule. So this is a very big factor in terms of health. So we are going to be active during Project U, obviously. So we don't have to worry too much about a sedentary lifestyle. And that means that we can probably push our carbohydrate level a little bit, but making sure that if you know that you're not going to be moving a lot that day, that you keep an eye on your carbohydrate consumption so that you can keep your blood sugar level really nice and stable. Okay, so we obviously can really work with people that have diabetes and insulin resistance, but what if you don't have that? Well, to some point, most people do have an issue with insulin resistance up to a point. You'll know this by getting hangry sometimes. You'll know that if you have have a point where sometimes you feel like you don't have a lot of power left in your body because you ran out of blood sugar. If you experience these symptoms sometimes, then it's possible that you have some form of insulin resistance and can benefit from becoming more metabolically flexible. And metabolic flexibility being able to generate energy from carb sources and also from your body fat. If you've never had to rely on your body fat before, the body doesn't exactly know how to kick that to kick that chain reaction into action. So it is also something that you can really look at making more efficient by practicing a low carbohydrate diet. Okay, so some of the signs that you might have metabolic syndrome are especially abdominal obesity. So our storage for our excessive carbohydrates usually happens around the organs in the abdomen. So we all know that abdominal obesity look, and it's high risk because it's also a risk factor for a lot of different diseases like heart disease, like diabetes. Okay, so elevated blood pressure, and that is also because there is a lot of fat there, and fat is not as vascular. It's not as easy for the body to service as other tissues. Elevated fasting blood sugar levels, high triglycerides that we just talked about, and low good cholesterol levels, which is HDL. So decreased inflammation, and this is one of the major factors, because even if you don't have metabolic syndrome, you could still be carrying quite a lot of inflammation in the body. And inflammation in the body can be caused by both psychological and physiological factors. Now, the reason that a low carbohydrate diet is so good with inflammation is because it's high in good fats like omega-3s. It decreases the consumption of grain products, which can be quite inflammatory in the system. It decreases in sugar because sugar is one of the main factors in inflammation in our bodies. And of course, the decrease in triglycerides, because instead of the triglycerides just sitting around in your system, you're actually utilizing them for energy. Okay, so let's get into the practical side of how do we get into a low carb diet. So what exactly are we looking at here? Are we looking at something really shocking? Well, not really. We're going to have a bit of a look here. Let me see if I can just move this over. Okay, so at the top of our little pyramids, we have nuts, seeds, and berries. Okay, all really healthy foods. Obviously, nuts and seeds being little powerhouses where a plant can grow from as well. So they are very high in micronutrients. They're also high in calories because fats are what sustain us. And also with berries as well. Well, berries are very low in calories, but they're also very high in nutrients and antioxidants, which really benefit our body. So at the top of the pyramid, the berries are there in the smallest amount because of the carbohydrate content of them, but they are definitely something that you can, if you're active during the day, then it's definitely something that you can incorporate into your diet. Nuts and seeds, of course, well known to prolong people's lives. In fact, people who consume nuts every day can expect to live 3 years longer than people that don't. Okay, so the next little section here is raw full fat dairy. Now, the reason that we go with full fat is because full fat dairy has a lower carbohydrate content. The sugar in milk is called lactose, and lactose intolerance is something that's quite well known now. But the higher the fat content of the dairy, the lower the amount of sugar and lactose in there. Also, if we're looking at the quality of dairy, your aged cheeses have a much lower content of lactose because they've been fermented out. And we're talking about high quality dairy, so grass-fed dairy, because the macronutrient content of grass-fed dairy is much higher in omega-3s, and we just spoke about those being very healthy and anti-inflammatory for us. Okay, then we have our nightshade vegetables and vegetables low in carbohydrates. So they're the next layer of our food pyramid, all really, really healthy vegetables there. And then we've got the non-starchy vegetables that are below that, and that is going to be the basis of our food. So you've also got your protein sources there on the right-hand side. So we're looking at fatty fish, meat, organ meats, and eggs, lean meat and fish up the top as well. But the reason that the fatty meats are more down the bottom is because their protein content is lower. And as we spoke about before, we have to be careful with the amount of protein, because if you start having a lot of protein, then it's going to be broken down as carbohydrate in the system. But once again, the quality is going to be really important. Now, protein is something that's going to satiate us. It's going to keep us fuller for longer. But these foods also contain a lot of micronutrients that are going to help, especially omega-3s, that are going to help nourish our body and stop inflammation. And when we stop inflammation, that is a stress on the system, we're going to be starting to feel better. Our body is going to start to function better as well. Now, on the other side of the pyramid is the bit that scares everyone, because we've always been told that, we have to eat low fat. We have to not have these fats because they're not good for us. Natural fats are what are eaten on a low carbohydrate diet. That means we do not go for refined fats, the fats that are manufactured in a plant. So, in an industrial plant. So we stay away from the vegetable oils. We stay away from canola. We stay away from sunflower oil. We stay away from peanut oil. We stay away from palm oil. We go for the really natural fats. The natural fats being butter, ghee, coconut oil, avocado oil, even lard and dripping, which come from meat as well. They're natural meat oils. And it's because we evolved as human beings on these foods. We didn't have sunflower oil in big plastic containers in the supermarket before the Industrial Revolution. So our bodies are not used to digesting that kind of oil, and they're very, very high in omega-6 oils. Now, omega-6 oils are well known to be inflammatory in the body, and they cause a lot of problems. So we want to switch to oils that are much higher in omega-3 content, and also higher in saturated fats. And we've been told the opposite the entire time, that actually saturated fats are not something to be afraid of. Saturated fats are a problem if there is an excess of carbohydrate in the blood, and not when you decrease the amount of carbohydrate there. And then, of course, herbs and spices. And herbs and spices, I love the way that they've put it in this pyramid, because herbs and spices are an amazing source of micronutrients. If you think about dried herbs and dried spices, they are, jam-packed full of all of these really good plant micronutrients that we might not get otherwise. So, go ahead and add that tasty stuff to your food. The other thing that when you're on a low carbohydrate diet is your requirement for salt is somewhat higher. So it's people are like, oh, well, I don't think it's going to be very tasty. Well, you can actually salt your food a little bit more on a low carbohydrate diet because your body is not holding on to all of that water, and it's not going to be an issue with high blood pressure. High blood pressure and salt is only an issue when you're eating too many carbohydrates. Okay. So let's have a look at our low carb veggies here. So pretty much anything that is green is going to be low in carbohydrates. And of course, our green leafies, we've been told that we need to eat green leafies all the time. It's very important. And yes, that is going to be one of the bases of what you're eating. And then, the other ones that are there, you can eat all of these without boundaries. If you're relatively active during the day, you don't need to count carbohydrates when it comes to low carb veggies. So we're going to move into the slightly more carbohydrate heavy vegetables, and these are the ones that you can still enjoy, but you don't need to. Sorry, I must have missed a slide. Okay, I'll get that slide to you later. So then we move, the next step would be things like pumpkins, things like, more beany things. So that was the nightshades and the other vegetables on the food pyramid. I'll add that slide later. Okay, and then we've got the healthy carbs. So these are the carbs. It just shows you the amount of carbs that are in 100-gram serving of each of these foods. So corn, you get 16 grams of carbs per 100 grams. Lentils, you get 12 carbs per 100 grams. And these are things that you can incorporate, but not on a regular basis. But these are the healthy carbohydrates that we can do. Maybe not baked beans, a bit too much sugar in there. But and these are the unhealthy carbohydrates. So you can have a look here. We've got bread, we've got pasta, we've got potatoes in there as well. There is some rice in there, although we could argue that whole grain brown rice can definitely fit into a low carbohydrate diet on a basis of not being a regular thing. But what you notice here is all of the carbohydrates that are represented here are quite low in micronutrients. And when we're talking about getting micronutrient density into our food, then we're looking at eliminating foods like this that won't give our bodies the nourishment that it needs. And once you put these kind of carbs, and I want to just eliminate that banana and the apple there from being unhealthy carbs, because I don't want to say that fruits are unhealthy. That's not true at all. But some of these other carbohydrates are not going to give your body the support and nourishment that you need. Okay, so let's look at a few hacks that we can use to tweak our food that we eat every day to having low carb versions of the normal food that we eat. So if you like mashed potato, you can very easily just cook up some cauliflower and either mash it up, or I put it through a blender, actually. That gives it a much smoother texture. And you'll be surprised at how much that actually tastes like mashed potato. I can also tell you that adding a knob of butter to it and a little bit of salt can make it taste amazing. I could just eat bowlfuls of that. It's so good. So if you want to replace rice, then you can actually use riced cauliflower. And these days, there's a lot of people that use cauliflower rice. There's lots of restaurants out there that are now offering rice as a cauliflower rice as a substitute as well. It's as simple as either grating it on a grater, which does take a long time, and I'm not about spending hours in the kitchen. My easy hack for that is you just put it in a blender with water, lots of water, and you just give it a couple of pulses, and then you run it through a strainer, and that's it. You have cauliflower rice. It's very easy. You can also buy it done for you as well. Now, there's also something called shirataki. It is a konjac noodle, and they do have them in rice form so that it looks like rice. It's 0 carbohydrate. And you can buy them in packets in the supermarket if you so wish. I'm not a massive fan of them simply because they do cause a lot of digestive issues with me. It kind of halts everything in there because it's kind of sticky and kind of cloying. But some people are able to utilize those in noodle form as well. Now, if you want to replace noodles, you can, of course, always use your zoodles, which is a spiralized zucchini. You can easily just grate it as well. I find that's a nice base for some pasta sauces too. And then, of course, there's good old spaghetti squash. And spaghetti squash, it looks like a pumpkin. What you can do is just roast it up. You just jam it in the oven for about an hour and just let it go. And then when it's cooked, you actually just get a fork and you scrape it out, and it actually looks like noodles. It's a really cool vegetable. Okay, so in terms of flour, you can replace your normal wheat flour or rice flour with almond flour, with coconut flour, or maybe with lupin flour. Lupin is it's like a lentil. It's from the same family as peanuts as well, so it's kind of like a bean. With crackers, if you're missing good old crackers, you can just utilize a little bit of shredded Parmesan and just make little piles of it and then pop it into the oven for about 10 minutes. And when they come out, when they harden up, they become really, really crispy. So that if you're missing chips, if you're missing something like that, then Parmesan crisps can be really, really nice. And my mum's a bit of a whiz at Parmesan crisps, aren't you, Mum? Yeah. You can also make little crackers with almond flour and an egg. You can just make a little dough out of that, press it out, roll it out, and then just pop it in the oven for 20 to 30 minutes. I think I have a cracker recipe anyway in the cookbook. If not, I will share it with you. And then in terms of bread, if you really miss bread, and that is what most people really miss when they go on a low carbohydrate diet, because a lot of us were brought up on bread, do not despair. There are options out there for you. If you can't be bothered spending hours in the kitchen making bread, I can't either. Gibson's has a wonderful range of keto breads that you can utilize at the moment, and there are definitely other options. I will pop them in the Facebook group today as well, so that you can utilize those if you're really missing bread. Obviously, keto bread can't replace bread 100% if you eat bread 3 times a day. It is definitely something that you should have moderately and not too much of. But for most people, bread is the breaking factor with a low carb diet. So I will give you options to be able to have some bread. So snacks, because this is always the thing, right? It's like, okay, well, if you take away all of my normal snacks, then what is it that I can actually eat if I get a little bit hungry on a low carbohydrate diet? What can I grab? Well, one of my meal prep hacks is to just chuck on some eggs, so that I've always got boiled eggs sitting in my fridge. It's a really dense, nutrient-packed snack, and you only need 1 egg or 2 eggs to feel full. It's one of those wonderful foods that really satiates you because it's got perfect macronutrient ratios to keep you full. So boiled eggs is one of my hacks. I like to just sprinkle a little bit of salt on them because I'm a bit of a salt freak. And what can you do for celery sticks? Celery sticks, you can have peanut butter with them. You can have cottage cheese with them. You can have something like a ranch dip with them. Nuts are always a great snack, but of course, when we're talking about wanting to do some weight loss as well, we have to portion our nuts because it's so easy to sit there and suddenly the whole bag is gone, right? So always make sure that if you're going to have nuts, that you portion it appropriately and just have your little portion there. And it makes you much more mindful of how much you're eating. And I would always recommend that you don't eat whilst you're doing something else as well, because that can actually stop you from being able to experience your satiation or your stop hunger signals. So that's definitely something that you need to do when it comes to that. Aged cheese, and in the same way as with the nuts, that needs to be appropriately portioned as well. But it's a nice snack. You know, how decadent is it to, you know, have a nice piece of aged cheese? That's what I love about a low carbohydrate diet as well. It's very nice. Tuna with mayonnaise, you can just get yourself a little can of tuna and you can pop some mayonnaise through it. You can also make lettuce wraps with it so that you feel like you've got something in there. You can stuff an avocado with whatever you like, cottage cheese, you can put tomatoes in there, you can put pesto in there, you can put scrambled egg in there. There's lots of things. If you like dried meats, then that is something that you can have. Look out for dried meats that are nitrate free and sulfate free, of course, because these are things that can really cause inflammation in your body as well. You could do asparagus dipped in cream cheese because cream cheese is quite a nice snack as well. Berries and Greek yogurt, you know, as long as you don't go overboard, half a cup of berries with a couple of spoonfuls of Greek yogurt is a great snack, and it gives you that nice little sweet touch as well if that's what you're missing. Broccoli and cheese dip, you could make a little dip out of some cream cheese. And then dark chocolate. Now, when I talk about dark chocolate, I'm talking about 70% and above. And we're talking a couple of squares and not an entire bar, of course. So yeah, there are great benefits to dark chocolate. And it tends to be one of those chocolates that you don't feel like you want to eat the whole bar of because you can feel the nutrient density of it. You know, just nibbling on a square of it or 2 squares of it can be a really nice way to take away some cravings as well. So that is the end of my presentation. Of course, you have the cookbook as well that you can refer to with lots of ideas for breakfast, lunches, snacks, and dinners. So, you know, have a look to see what you like in there. You don't have to go through the whole thing word by word. You can also, you know, switch out things. But the good thing about having this low carbohydrate diet, and the biggest thing, is that you won't experience hunger all the time. So you'll actually be able to focus on other things in your life other than eating. And that's what for me was the greatest freedom, because I spent years of my life on diets. And I was always thinking about the next meal, always thinking about what I was going to have next. And that just isn't the case anymore on a low carbohydrate diet. So, yeah, Pete, you can stop recording.